I, of course, grew up in Nebraska, and BoysTown was as famous as anything in the whole world at that time, particularly for Nebraska. And so when I got here and really kind of had no place to go, I drove in there and they said, "Hey, you can live here." So I stayed there, and they discovered I had driven in there in a car that was mine, and I had a car. They said, "You can't have a car in BoysTown. You're just one of the kids here." I think I was, what, maybe 16 or 17 by then. And I says, "Well, okay. So what do you want me to do?" They said, you can't keep the car, or you have to leave." So I thought about it overnight. Next morning I kind of disappeared. Went on down the road and hitchhiked to New York. And
So you did get rid of your car, though?
I sold it in New York or traded it or something.
Oh, okay. And then you went, you said to Persia? Or to
Iran. Persia.
Yeah, that's what used to be Persia.
Well, yeah, it's still, they call it Persia.
And you basically didn't have a high school education at all?
No, I didn't finish high school, technically.
Yes.
Even though I would have graduated, I think I was supposed to schedule to be valedictorian, but not if you don't go to school and leave in the middle of your junior or whatever year.
And I take it you mentioned at one point or another that you had some sexual experience with the Crozier fathers. Was that from a priest, or?
No, it was, I shouldn't even talk about this.
Well, but
it was,
since you're so heavily involved in the recording of what...
I had been living there 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I didn't have a place like the other kids did to go, see? So I stayed there over the summer right at the monastery when the other students went home, you understand?
Yes.
And this one time for Christmas, one of the kids invited me to come to his house, so they gave me permission to go, and I said, fine. And we take a bus down there. He lives somewhere around Minneapolis. And on the bus sitting next to me was this pretty little package that we know as females today. And she asked me how much I ever knew about girls. And I said, well, not too much. And to make a long story kind of fast and short, our discussion went on, and then she asked me if I even knew how they were made different than us. And I said, well, I've read, kind of like a cow, they have a slit. And she laughed. She said, you really don't know much, do you? She says, you ever felt one of them? I said, no, good God, no. And then she kind of quietly took my hand, and she put a coat. It was Christmas time, in Minnesota, and we were driving on the bus, and she just kind of puts a coat over her lap, takes my hand and slides it into this new world I hadn't really ever seen or experienced before, and she says, now tickle. So I did, and I kind of enjoyed it, and she enjoyed it even more. Anyway, so then when I got back, I went to confession right away to confess my terrible sin, and the next thing I know, they had told me I had to leave the monastery.
Because of that?
Yes.
When, in fact...
And I couldn't be given even forgiveness at the time.
Yeah, and in BoysTown...
So I went back for the first time about 6 months ago, 52 years, or I don't know how many, 62 had been since I'd been there. Oh yeah, strange.
What is ironic about that is that the Catholic Church is the thing most involved, that everyone knows about sexual abuse of children.
A lot of it has come from there. In fact, the first major lawsuit, the first lawsuit of any kind against the church and against, well, in this case, one of the principal, most significant ones in the whole Franklin thing was a man named Larry King, who went to prison for, I don't know, a dozen years or so as a result of my work on that case. But anyway, back then, in the lawsuit I had against him, which I also named the priests who were involved. They dismissed out the priests. I later found that was a judge who was very strong in his beliefs of the priests always being good and innocent. And so anyway, and I won $1,200,000 judgment against Larry King, but they dismissed the priests out because they said this man who was the judge, a federal judge, said this just can't be, the church can't be held liable in something like this. So they dismissed the church out. But since that day, as you well know, much more has come out, but that was the first case where the church was actually sued, and I think I told you about why I did it, because I called and got an appointment at the Vatican with an appointment with the Pope at the time. So I go to the Vatican and discover what a papal audience really is. It means you're with a crowd of people and you get a blessing and get a little speech from the Pope, and then you're assigned to go see a cardinal or a bishop or somebody who deals with your particular issue. And it was this cardinal, at the time that was the one that said, the church knows about the problem, but the North American church will not listen to Rome. They will not listen to the Vatican. We know about the problem. We've tried to correct it. The North American church, kept referring to it as the North American church, keeps anyway. And I says, okay. And so I went back, and that's when I filed the lawsuit and named the priests and so on, and the diocese, and they let them off. They dismissed it. And then years later, I don't know what was it here, a few years ago, years later, after I had made this trip to the Vatican and got told by the cardinal that I should do this, I'm watching as they're having, the Pope died, or they had to replace him 4, 5, 6 years ago, whatever it was, and I'm watching, and this cardinal, who I had been sent to see when I was in Rome at my appointment with the Vatican, and here it is, this identical cardinal who's now walking out, and the white smoke is going, and he's the new Pope. Ratzinger, I think was his name, wasn't it?
Well, isn't he the Pope now?
Yes, he's the Pope now. So I sent him this letter a couple years ago and reminded him of all this, our original meeting, and him being the one that instructed me to do this, and I did what he had told me. I'll give you a copy of that letter I sent.
Yes, please do.
You'll be surprised, because it is 100% something I remember well, because it was just a little while ago, and it's 100% absolutely truthful in every way, shape, and form. You'll like it.
So
hold on, I'll call Terry and tell her to get a copy. Wait, I've got a copy here. I'll just print off.
Okay, well, this you're doing really excellent. Let's keep.
You'll like the letter. It'll surprise you.
And the thing is that what seems to be the problem is it isn't the Catholic Church problem. I've just picked up newspapers time and time again. I was in Wisconsin when they indicted one of the bishops of the Episcopalian Church who'd been over in England, and as soon as he got back, he was indicted because they'd literally turned one of the seminaries into a pedophile situation. And this is what I think is important to every family, is that not to think of this as the Catholic Church is the sinner, but that many pedophiles have infiltrated the various churches.
Yes.
And as I recall to you, one lady who was working with a little girl said, in my church the cross is upright during the day and upside down at night.
Yeah.
And I actually heard from somebody in the Iowa City area that they had actually gone into one of the major churches in the downtown in the middle of the night and performed satanic ceremonies. And Ted Gunderson, whom we both knew, did give me a letter from the son of Sam. and the son of Sam said, look to the military bases and the universities if you wanted to see where the Satanists are. He said, you'll find them in both places. And certainly you and I both know Michael Aquino, and in the case of Johnny Gosch supposedly came to Noreen, and you were the one that got Noreen to admit she had seen her son again. Johnny Gosch came in the middle of the night 15 years after he was kidnapped, and he very much was intact. Yes. Some of these kids are not. And he said in no uncertain terms, it was Michael Aquino who paid $6,000 for me to the kidnappers in Sioux City and took me away.
Yes.
And what I'm saying is, wow, whom can we trust? You certainly can't trust the priest, the pastor, the rabbi. Whom can we trust? Whom can the kids go to? When in Iowa, do you know when Tom Vilsack was governor?
Yes.
For 2 terms. You know who he appointed as head of the Department of Human Services? Jessie Rasmussen. And who is she?
Yeah. She was involved in...
She's the sister of Bob Kerrey.
Yeah.
As governor and senator. Wasn't he instrumental in helping to cover up this whole business?
I believe that.
Yes, and she has been in the Department of Human Services here, and when she came to Iowa, there was scandal after scandal involving her. First of all, she brought consultants over from Nebraska and paid one of them $30,000 for consulting for 2 weeks. She supposedly paid one of them $250,000 for consulting. And then she employed the one she paid $30,000 to, and halfway through, after 2 years, somebody began looking at the computers at the Department of Human Services and discovered that all of them had kiddie porn on them. And they searched his house, and they said in the Des Moines Register, they found 5,000 pieces of kiddie porn and the camcorder from Woodward, the Institute in Iowa for the Mentally Retarded. Now, the Register did not make the leap that almost any reasonable individual would and ask the question, what was he doing with a camcorder from Woodward? Now, what would you suspect?
Yeah. Nothing good.
Yes, I'm suspecting that literally we're talking about using the retarded children to make kiddie porn. And when the assistant to Governor Robert Ray ran against him after the first 4 years, one of his major campaign tenets was, I'll get rid of Jessie Rasmussen. I have never seen a state, except I don't know enough about Nebraska, but I have never seen a state like Iowa so good at covering everything up and not following through. When I wrote for Noreen Gosch, Why Johnny Can't Come Home, the one thing that I noted was that the Register hadn't bothered to mention, other than the 2 boys that were kidnapped, Johnny Gosch in '82 and Eugene Martin in '83. They didn't say, and the Kansas City Star had newspaper boys kidnapped, and the Omaha World Herald had newspaper boys, and the Norfolk, Nebraska had newspaper boys, and Wisconsin had newspaper boys, and Cleveland had newspaper boys. And if you look around in big cities, there are no newspaper boys any longer. It's almost all adults making the deliveries on all of these routes everywhere.
You're right.
And it's because...
I never thought about that.
It's because the word got around to the parents, even if it didn't register with the media itself, that it wasn't no longer safe. I was a newspaper boy.
Yeah, I was too.
I mean, I delivered newspapers. And that's the whole point today. Who's safe? Would you leave your little 4-year-old in your front yard today to play by herself? The Amish in several areas have told me they no longer let their kids walk the mile or so to the country school without an adult with them. So all of a sudden, well, over a span of years, when I was a kid, I never had any problems. I delivered newspaper all over the place. I get on my bicycle and ride for 10 miles out in the country, and nothing would happen. And today, you have to be afraid that something's going to happen to your kid if you don't keep an eye on them. You got to take your child to church to take part in church activities. You need to monitor to make sure that nothing untoward happens to that child during that time. Because we have had so many, and I have simply, as a newspaper person, been made super conscious of this. And I gave you an article about the breaking of all these pedophile things all the way right over to the Kansas City area. I mean, it's all the way across the United States, over in Europe as well. But at the same time, over in the corner on that Sunday paper 2 Sundays ago was an article about a pastor waiting for sentencing. He'd already been convicted of molesting a child. And so I can't pick up a paper. I had been in Goshen one time, and it just took the paper from a normal weekday, and there was a rape, a molestation, and something. There were 3 major items in that Goshen paper. Now that's supposed to be Goshen, Indiana, this nice little Christian community. And what I got from the Mennonites is basically, we won't look, we won't see when it's going on around them. Kelowna has the same problem. I lived in Kelowna, Iowa. It was a community surrounded by Amish, and yet I had to have some of the women tell me that bad things had happened to them in church, and that they couldn't do anything about it because you would get crushed. And I had a lady who was a good, she claimed a good Christian lady, and she said, if you tell that, they'll kill you. Now, isn't it nice to know that the churches, the so-called Christian churches of this country, would send out a hitman to take you down if you started reporting all the pedophile activities that are going on in churches around this country.
Yeah.
And it is something else. Would you just tell me how Lauren Schmidt, and we should tell who Lauren Schmidt is, and how he brought you into that original Franklin investigation?
Lawrence Schmidt was the senator. I was the senator with him. And after I got out, he still remained as a senator. And we were close friends and had done a lot of things, particularly on behalf of agriculture. We worked together. But then I got involved in looking into how some financial institutions, I was head of banking for the Senate here in Nebraska. Banking, commerce, and insurance officially, but banking primarily, head of banking. And in the banking industry, about the time all this started, right when I was leaving the Senate, you know, that was when they started having these bank failures. And one after another, they started showing up as, hey, somebody on the inside here was stealing from the bank or something, or there was something strange going on here. So I started these investigations, and then he continued it since I left the Senate, and he continued on carrying on, helping on those, and it just led to these other places. And when I found that some of these things I was being told before were, I had made a public statement, published in all the papers, that this all has to be nonsense and unbelievable. If I really believed it, I stupidly said this, if I really believed any of it, I'd be the first one to step forward and lead the cause to investigate and punish the wrongdoers.
And you're talking about the child things that came
The child things, but the child things also involved magically enough, some of the financial institutions and some of the people involved there. Larry King being a classic example. He had a financial institution that went belly up eventually. And so I got my bluff called, and so when I got my bluff called by some of the children, who sent a letter then saying, "Oh, you don't believe us, huh? Well, we could prove it to you if you just come check some stuff or talk to us, but we're locked up, you know." So I did. And the things that they offered as proof, one of them a pile of buried, what would you call them?
Diaries?
Diaries, yeah. They were the kid's diaries made from the time he was 5 years old. His grandpa had taught him and instructed him how to keep a diary. Well, he had 8 or 10 years of diaries hidden in a window well by a house. And he called my bluff, and one of the girls that was involved, being banged and screwed and had a baby with the police chief. So one thing led to another, and I said, okay.
And that was Waterman, the chief of police,
yeah.
that you identified in the book, the Franklin cover.
Oh, yes. In fact, he sued me. Did I tell you about this last lawsuit?
And they threw it out of court.
The last one, huh?
Didn't they throw it out of court?
Well, not only did we have a full trial, I had to go out to Ogden, Utah, Mormon Central, if you want to call it, where the Mormon University is located. He was now a professor instructing in law in the Mormon University. So he sues me out there in Ogden, Utah. And I had to take witnesses from all over the United States out there and have an actual trial. And I can still remember that his judge had given that decision. Starts out saying, "Well, I know Mr. Wadman well. He's one of the finest men I've ever known." I thought, oh boy, I'm doomed. And then he says, "But I have no choice under my duties as a judge, following the Constitution of the United States, but to rule in favor of the senator from Nebraska." And I thought, oh God, this is unreal. So then he appealed that one to the Supreme Court of Utah, and he appealed the decision of the trial, and that happened so quick that I didn't even have a chance to even go back there. The Supreme Court just threw it out and ruled in my favor. So life goes on, and it's strange.
Yes, and the interesting thing is that after all that your book represented, and let's just talk briefly about that, because I said I was doing a radio show in Columbia, Missouri, when the host of it played a clip of an interview with you on a California station, and you said that the Franklin cover-up book has sold over 200,000 copies.
Oh yeah, that was early on. See, I printed the book. Now, did I ever tell you why? That's in the book, why I printed it. I got told by my best friend that my safety, my life...
And that was William Colby.
William E. Colby. See, he was the one I was assigned to when I got to Vietnam as a soldier. Captain over there. I was made a captain the day I arrived, because I had stupidly volunteered for all these special schools, Jungle, Airborne Ranger, Vietnamese language. And the Tet Offensive had broken out, and the war was going hot and heavy when I arrived there then, after being called by my Uncle Sammy, saying, "You have to go, boy." Anyway, so, forget what I was talking about, but...
You were over there with Colby.
I was over there with Colby, and I was assigned to him, and he had created this program called the Phoenix Program. And that was kept top secret, as you may know. I don't know if you do know this.
Oh, I know all
of
it.
Up until about 10 or 15 years ago, when it started leaking out. But it was kept secret for the previous 50 or so years.
See, I worked with a police officer in Des Moines.
Oh, yeah.
Who was a Phoenix assassin.
Okay, so he knows what Phoenix was.
Yes.
What my job over there was, I had a team, And instead of bombing whole villages and just killing women and children indiscriminately, like apparently we had done more than a few times, to try to get more support of the people, we would have special trained teams go in just for the purpose of identifying and arranging and assassinating or killing, however you want to phrase it, those key people, the leaders in that town or that village, who are the leaders of the Viet Cong or the North Vietnamese. So that's what I had, was a team headed up.
Yeah.
I was the head of it.
What I want and what we were on is that William Colby became your best friend,
Oh,
but
yeah,
he also became head of the CIA.
He was the one that when the Army tried to stop me from running for senator from over there, which had never been done in the history of the country, and since he was my boss, I went to him and I said, hey, I'm following the law. I'm just going to be running for senator back to the United States. And one rule that I don't know if you're familiar with, if you've ever been in the military or not.
Oh, I've been in the military.
Okay,
I was
then
right
you
here at Lincoln Air Force Base.
Okay. Soldiers in combat are allowed to send their mail, their mail. They don't have to put a stamp on it. They just write free on the envelope. Do you know this?
No, I didn't know that.
Oh, yes.
I was
Soldiers in combat
so.
are allowed to send their mail free. The idea was so they could get to their wife and children without going to a post office and buying stamps when you're out there in the middle of the jungle or something. So I organized a bunch of little Vietnamese gals to copy phone books, which I had shipped to me by the tons, and send out these letters I'd write, make copies of them, and send them out from Vietnam by the hundreds of thousands. That was my campaign, and it got world attention, and I got all kinds of attention. It ran the campaign, and they tried to stop me because they said, you can't do this. This is soldiers' personal mail. I said, this is my personal mail to all these people by the hundreds of thousands. And Kobe was the one that took up my side and said, hey, he's doing his job over here. He also is entitled to free mail, said mail service. And the fact that he's sending 200,000 instead of 2, Colby got me approved, and I conducted the campaign, and first, last, and only one to ever become a senator without setting foot in the United States. Ran the campaign from Vietnam.
And then later, when you were involved in all of this mess here with the Franklin cover-up, it was Colby, was it not, who said,
oh, yes,
get the damn book in print if you know what's good.
Colby was the one that told me, tell your story. Tell your story. And I said, what do you mean? He says, you know what's happening, you know who they are, you know who the bad guys and good guys are. Just tell it all. Whether anybody believes a word of it's not important. What is important is that you've told your story, and there's going to give you more credibility, believability, if they knock you off or kill your kids or something like that. That'll make you more believable than if they just call you names and try to discredit you. He says, but read the book Billy Budd. And I have forgotten completely the years, after he told me this. Read Billy Budd, read Billy Budd. I'd forgotten who this Billy Budd even was. Well, it was a book written back there, I don't know.
Herman Melville.
Herman Melville.
Yes.
And it's a story of, I guess, can't remember that well, sailors.
And the one gets hung even though everybody knows
He's innocent because you're protecting the system. The higher-ups who are insiders in the system, you each kind of cover each other's butts, and you know what I'm saying. A protects B, B protects C, and yes, it's terrible if you have to do it, but every once in a while you have to sacrifice some stupid, innocent private or whatever over here or there.
It's like war, where they say they are expendable.
They are expendable. So anyway, I finally remembered he said that one day when I saw the movie, and so I kept getting deeper and told my story and found out how horrible it really was.
And as I said, that book was mentioned. Do you know how many you sold to date?
Oh, of my book?
Yeah, you had said over 200,000.
Oh, yeah. It's, I'm going to say it has to be around 500,000 because we still get some, even though it's sold on Amazon, whatever that is now, sold there, and we get some money from there every once in a while. But it's funny, I never spent a penny advertising or promoting or anything. I just wrote it as, like Colby told me.
Yes.
That's your defense. Just tell your story. Tell it like it is. Blow it out all straight. So if you have to prove it, you can prove it.
And
so I wrote the book, and it's
had the gall to sue you, even though the young lady, and are we not mentioning her name because that's dangerous?
Which one?
Alicia.
Oh. I think she doesn't want her name mentioned, but I don't know.
Okay, well, the thing was, I was planning on giving her credit in the book as
you call her direct. I'll give you her number.
One of the two who actually stuck up for their belief system and wouldn't recant.
Nope, she didn't. She stood through thick and thin and went to prison.
That's right, and I have to admire some of these people. I had one of my lawyers come back to me when I was suing the Sutherland Printing Company for pirating my work, and he said, "John, unless you drop this lawsuit right now, you're going to go to jail."
Yeah.
And I said, like, hell I am. And he couldn't meet my eye, and he had made some kind of deal with C.M. Manley, the city attorney of Grinnell, and Jim Arns, the chief of police there, later said, that man is the main judge buyer for this state. If you want to get anything done, you want a judge to rule your way, you hire him, and he offers money, drugs, sex, even sex with little kids. And I didn't have a connection when I heard that. But it was later, by 1990, I was printing a newspaper. That newspaper circulated over here. That is how I got the EIR information and went to Senator Loren Schmidt and read him from that and said, is this true? And I actually went to, what is the organization that is supposed to look into violation of human rights around the world?
Oh, I know who you mean. I can't.
Well, I actually had
but in my old age, I can't remember the name.
I had to call London.
Yes.
And they said, we can't investigate violation of human rights in the United States because the U.S. government won't allow us to do so. And I had that on tape, and I found that, but it's gotten lost again. I actually was sitting there on the phone with the camera running while I was talking to this lady on the phone from London. And as I said, I have gone everywhere and talked to everybody. I have given Alex Jones stuff, but what happens is you just email and you don't know them.
Right.
Nothing ever comes back.
Yeah, I know.
Coast to Coast, George Norrie, and before him, the other one. What I'm trying to do is make this about 1 hour. And then that's all this thing will record, and so far we're doing fine. And I just want to work this up through this. You're saying now that you could have sold as many as 500,000 of that?
Oh, I'm sure.
And
because remember, I just printed them by the tens of thousands here locally.
Yes.
And then it just, people write, call, and then I finally...
The only thing that I objected to in the cover of the book was when you said all of this in Nebraska, when in actuality, if you go into the book,
okay,
it ties into Chicago. And see, I took that to Mike Ryko, and
I'll go back and change it.
They went and they have created newspapers where you can't get in unless somebody will vouch for you.
Yeah.
and I could get no one from Mike Reiko's office to allow me to come up. I knew John Van, who was the science reporter for the Chicago Tribune. He would not let me come up. I finally told the whole story to one of the guards, and they said, we'll take these books and we'll make sure that they're delivered to Mike Reiko's desk. And later I got one of his assistants, and she said, oh, we've looked at the book and it doesn't have anything to do with Chicago. It's all about what's going on in Nebraska. And I knew they hadn't read the book.
Okay.
I knew they hadn't read the book.
When I probably wrote it,
Yeah.
my first edition and everything, you got the first edition, don't
Yes,
you?
yes.
We'll get the second edition.
Well, I have.
Do I say it in there? Because I copied
No,
the
it's just that the cover gives the influence. Now,
I know.
when Ted Gunderson, and apparently he did the Little Red Book, the carefully crafted hoax.
Oh yeah, that's right.
That was a mistake in terms of titling. It should have been something like, they called it a carefully crafted hoax.
Right.
So that immediately you got the impression that this was a conspiracy to cover up things.
Right.
And what I hope is that I can find, I have a copy somewhere. And I didn't know Ted wrote the whole thing because he supposedly had the introduction to it. But apparently I've heard that he wrote all of it. And he was involved with the Linda Wiegand thing. And the thing that's on the internet is he saying this was the most corrupt court system he had ever seen.
Yes.
Because he personally told me, get the hell out of Connecticut, John. And I was only there a little while to assist with what I could. And he went to every member of the legislature of the Connecticut House and Senate and handed out the information, and nobody did.
A book when they come in here, and if I autograph a book for somebody, I'll give them a copy of that.
Okay.
Conspiracy of Silence.
So I did notice that it has, I keep telling them to go to your website because I trust that most, because I've already seen ones where they doctor things. And the so-called series that I told you about, Faces of Death,
Yes.
when you go online and try to look those documentaries up, they don't exist anymore. Faces of Death is a Hollywood movie, and that's the only thing listed there. And I'm saying, as you have said, when I tried to get the Columbia Library to buy copies of your book, and they went through normal library channels, and they came back to me and said, John, the book's out of print.
See, I had that experience myself. I went, when I started getting these letters from all over and calls about, and all the people would hear was the book's out of print. And I couldn't believe it, and that's why let me just do this real quick.
Go ahead.
Hello? Yes. Okay, do you know where your daddy is? Oh, that's right, he's in Carter. Okay, well, tell him I was looking for him again. I will stop over there in about 15 minutes. Okay, bye-bye.
Please say a command.
Oh, shut up. That was Senator Schmidt's daughter. She rents from me here, you know. She's headed right to life for the state.
Yes.
And she has something she wants to show me, I guess.
Okay, what I'm trying to emphasize, and that's good, that you're saying tens of thousands of those have gone out. All I was after,
Oh, yes.
all I was after when I copied that and made 100 copies is just made sure that probably one of them was going to be left around sometime in the future, because I didn't have the wherewithal, you know, to put them out. I think they cost $2.50 or something like that bucks a piece to duplicate them in a
I
place
don't know what
that
they
I
cost.
used.
I just have duplicated
Right, but-
and given them away by the thousands.
Well, I did, you know, it was a VHS, and I was doing Amish buggies across America and so on, and that's the ones that are now Netflix things without my permission, without,
Oh, I know that.
yeah.
But see, they're selling this on the internet too. And they were doing my book all over the internet, and that's when I finally got this Amazon.com involved. So,
Yes.
but they said it was out of print, and on and on and on.
Yes, and I, you know, that's when I called you, and I got the library there. The Boone County Library has been very cooperative, and this is one of our major problems. We have, what I say today in America, we have 5 branches of government. The media and the clergy are part of the
Yes.
501c3 corporate
I've
system.
never heard that phrase before, but it just instantly makes more sense than just about anything else. You know that?
And
It's a separate branch of government.
and the other thing is that it's already, I was talking about this 20 years ago, it's being talked about now on the net. There are other people. Is a 501c3 church really Christian? And this question is being asked because in Sioux City, one of the pastors tried to get up and speak about the corruption in the area. And what happened to him? The IRS came out to his doorstep and said, do you know, if you keep on like that, you're going to lose your 501c3 tax-free status. Now I want to give you the Constitution of the United States, the First Amendment. Congress shall make no laws governing the practice of the freedom of religion. And what does the 501c3 do if it tells the pastor of a church, if you speak out morally, if you actually believe in the Ten Commandments, if you actually believe in the Bible, and you speak out morally, you're getting involved with the government, and we can take your tax status away. And what I have found is what I am calling the hole in the bucket, and that's about libraries. I had a major fire in 2003 and lost all of my books that I had collected. Your book, a lot of other things, Kathy O'Brien's Transformation of America, and I went to the Boone County Library a year later, and I'd say 75% of the books that I'd lost in that fire were there. But now it comes to the hole in the bucket. This is a Harry Belafonte song, and it came to me where he's complaining. The woman says, go and get some water, and he says, I can't get any water, there's a hole in the bucket. And, well, repair the hole. No, I can't repair the hole. I don't have any tools to repair it. And this is what's happening in libraries. You have an extremely important book, and one of them was the $3 trillion war, written about how much the war in Iraq was going to cost us in the end to take care of all the soldiers who are now without limbs, without eyes, and so on. And that book was done by a Nobel Prize winning economist. And I got the library to buy it. And 1 year later, I buy it for $1 on the remainder sale, because if the book isn't checked out, the library gets rid of it. And we are turning all the libraries in all the states around this country not into education centers, but into entertainment centers, where you can go in and get the latest video movie, where you can get all kinds of books on tape. And I'm in Gallatin, which is a county seat town in Gallatin, Missouri. And when I went to the library and did a search for CIA, I came up with about 6 fiction books and nothing in the way of nonfiction at all. So what is happening is the authors like Nick Bryant, who write the Franklin Scandal, those books don't go in the library, or if they do and the librarian doesn't stand there and everybody should read this, then pretty soon it's remaindered out and put in the garage sale that they have to raise funds for the nice romance novels and the nice movies and the nice other things. And I had a policeman who compared the United States to Rome. And you have in this country now bred in circuses. You have the universities, Nebraska, Iowa, and so on. Football, all kinds of money for that. Now, I read enough of that recent book you got about State College, Pennsylvania, and that's how I'd like to wind this thing up. Tell me your involvement in State College. I'll tell you that I read enough of that to know it's sickening. They actually had fundraisers with prizes, and the prizes were your own special little boy that you can go to bed with. And see, that's something that hasn't come out in the news at all.
Yeah.
What it is presented as, oh, is this one pedophile was doing everything.
Yes,
And
that's not true. As I
and-
say, okay,
I didn't remember this because it was so many years ago. But about a dozen years ago, at the height of this whole Franklin thing, one of the things that I found out was these little kids, boys and girls, were being taken across state lines and to certain other key places where they had pedophiles. And one of the places I discovered, which I had completely spaced off and forgot about, was a place called Pennsylvania, at a university there. Not only did I go there personally and meet with public officials and try to get them to do something, but I had completely forgotten that this Sandusky had come to Nebraska as well as some other Pennsylvania officials at the time, and I identified them and pointed out that they were dealing with certain key ones here who I quite frankly, had gotten terminated from one of them, top official at the university. He got terminated because of my book that was first edition coming out and so on and so forth. And I had been on several national talk shows at the time. And once again, I forgot about these. And they had played some of these back now that some things were coming out. And they saw that I had identified the Pennsylvania. Craig, I'll have to call you back. I apologize, but I can't talk right now. I'm in a meeting. I'll call you back. Anyway, so I had gone on national talk shows then and identified by name and location and everything this Pennsylvania situation. I kind of spaced that off. So they had dug these up at some of these radio programs. They had dug up the old recordings of them.
Yes.
And were playing them and calling me, wanting me to do radio talk shows every day here for the last 6 months. I've been getting these calls from across the United States wanting me to do talk shows on this. But meantime, I had completely forgotten pretty much until they started playing some of it back for me and reminding me and me going back to my files. But I had actually taken some of the kids from here over to Pennsylvania to tell their story and introduced them. And that's when they shut me up there apparently, and like so many times, say, you can't say these things, you can't use these names unless they're in prison or they're already convicted or something like that.
Well, I found...
And so I was the one that first identified him and told him about it, and sure enough, I was right.
Well, and what I found is the news people, some of the public broadcast people, are still referring to him as the alleged, He's already been convicted. He's no longer alleged.
I know.
And the unfortunate thing is that he is the tip of the iceberg, because so much of this is roiling around the country.
Yes.
As I said, I know the University of Iowa is a major pedophile center, and I received a copy of my alumni magazine, and it has a little girl on the front with her mouth taped up. And it's all about slavery and sexual abuse of children, and I wrote to the editor that I tried to expose this in 1992. And she wrote back, "Don't you come here. Don't you email me anymore. If I see you coming to my offices, I'm going to call the police." Now, I've done 22 books. One of them with the head of the Writers' Workshop.